this as well. A number of people have asked they wanted to participate, but they weren't able to be here, so they've asked for the meeting to be recorded. I hope that's okay with everybody. I've started the recording, and so we'll just be able to document both the presentation and then the questions that you have and our discussion. The plan is, so this is the first developers roundtable that we've had since March 2019, actually. And if you think back to March 2019, it was a pretty eventful month. And so, nothing has quite been the same since then, but hoping to get back to in-person developer roundtable meetings. But I know regardless of whether we're in person or whether we use this format, we're gonna make these regular again. So on a quarterly basis, we will have developer roundtable meetings, and we'll be sharing agendas in advance. At the end of this meeting today, I'll ask if anybody has input or wants to share suggestions for future agenda items, and then we'll be able to accommodate that. So just to kick off the presentation, let's see here, today's agenda. I've already sent this out, but we're going to cover new procedures. We're going to cover some updates from the building division. We're going to speak about planning and affordable housing, and then have opportunity and time for a roundtable discussion on some specific issues, but also open items. The plan is for this meeting to be when, the first time on the agenda is new procedures. And so what I plan to do is use the developer roundtable meetings as a way to sort of announce to the community and those that are interested new procedures, policies, things that impact you and how you develop properties, how you process applications. When we're making changes along those lines, we want to make sure everybody understands and is aware of those changes in advance. So that'll be like a standing part of these agendas going forward, are announcements about new procedures. Jumping right into that, there are two new procedures that we want to highlight today for you. The first is that the City of San Luis Obispo has now an infrastructure analyst within our finance department. Esteban Cano wasn't able to be here on the call today, so I'm not able to introduce him to everybody, but he's been doing great work in terms of supporting the processes around reimbursement agreements and fee credits. And so this comes into play anytime a developer is building public infrastructure, and especially in cases where they are building more than their fair share. There is the ability to get reimbursement for those expenditures, or to accomplish to get fee credits at the building permit counter when as part of that building permit process. And so what we're doing here is formalizing that with an application that needs to be submitted prior to or along with the building permit application. We evaluate requests to make sure they're consistent with our policies. And then if there's a reimbursement agreement, that's something that goes in front of the city council, although credits are able to be managed at the staff level. So this is really an area the city council over the past several years has allocated funding as part of our economic development strategy to a strategic infrastructure fund that the city has. And then those funds essentially become the city resource to partner on partnership projects. When there's a capital improvement project that includes private development contributing, either constructing improvements or providing funding for improvements, we call those partnership projects. And we've been actively strategizing to be able to, for the city to be able to pay its fair share so that it doesn't delay construction of important public improvements. And so people are able to move forward and accomplish the conditions of approval for their project by, building out adjacent infrastructure. The other procedure that's a new procedure that we want to highlight is the temporary certificate of occupancy. So we've created an application form. We have instructions and a policy to support implementation. There's a fee of $891 for temporary certificate of occupancy. That is a fee that's been authorized by the City Council in the past. And what we've done now is develop a policy and procedure to support implementation. And so this will be a process that goes into effect on January 1st. We'll have all of the information available for download on the website, and we'll be able to share that out in advance for temporary certificates of occupancy. Great, so those are the new procedures, and then we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to continue to move on. Again, if you have questions about things as we go, I think it's fine to raise your hand and we'll try to accommodate that. I want to be able to make it all the way through the presentation and the discussion, but we'll see how it goes. The next item I wanted to hit on was the new structure that we have for our growing building and safety division. And I hope you can, see this organizational chart on the slide here. But what I want to highlight is, the community development director oversees the work of the building and safety division. Right now, what we have is Roger Maggio is our fire marshal and chief building official. And I don't actually supervise Roger. He's supervised by Chief Agson in the fire department, but I have a dashed line to Roger. So I do oversee his work as chief building official, and he oversees the work of the deputy building official. So this is the new structure really, is that the deputy building official sits over 3 supervisors now in the building and safety division. And those supervisors include a code enforcement supervisor, building permit services supervisor, and then a supervising building inspector. And the supervising building inspector is a new position for the city of San Luis Obispo. It's a way to have a supervisor in the field supporting the work of our inspectors to be able to provide more real-time feedback and problem solving and response to issues that are encountered in the field to enable projects to move forward and to reduce the number of times that we ask for plan revisions to be submitted at the building counter, which can sometimes stop progress. And so a little bit of a new strategy, and what this structure is it's a scalable organizational structure to a much greater extent than we existed before, where we were very linear. And so when we were adding bodies, we were adding them to a single chain of command, and this change is going to serve us well. So some of the pending recruitments that we have are for deputy building official, for plans examiner, and for a stormwater building inspector. And then we have some temporary assignments also to announce, which is John Mezzapezza, who is acting as our code enforcement supervisor, and Trevor Nelson, who's acting as the supervising building inspector. And so this next slide just, identifies the who's who in terms of supervision and management of the building and safety division. I'm going to make this whole presentation available to you, and there are hot links in it that will give you access to the documents that we discuss and other tools. But the individual emails here are linked for Roger, for Greg. Greg Adams is a consultant who works for Four Leaf, but he is an experienced building official, and so he is basically helping us launch this new position of deputy building official. Greg, you're on the call, actually, if you want to say a quick hello to everybody.
Yeah. I appreciate being here, and it's a joy to work with these folks here. They're got a very good crew here, and we got some growing we're doing here, and some developing, and I'm very excited to be a part of it.
All right. Well, thank you, Greg. We appreciate the engagement. Vanessa is, she has a new title in terms of building permit services supervisor. She now also oversees the plans examiner, so that all of the work, all of the functions associated with the intake and issuance of building permit are under a single supervisor. And then another new face here is Trevor Nelson, our supervising building inspector. And I know, Trevor, if you're on the call, you want to say a little hello to folks? Let's see, he actually may not be on the call yet because he was completing an interview for the stormwater building inspector, but we'll get a chance to introduce him when he joins. Let's see, there's a hand up, John's iPhone.
Hey, Michael, it's John Tricamo.
John Tricamo, hi.
Hi. So I really appreciate this flow chart. I would say that one thing that would be helpful for us would be a good description of who we should be asking for what. Typically in the past, what's happened is once somebody answers their phone and gives competent information, they become the point person for all questions, And so I don't know if you guys can supplement with that or include that, but that would be super helpful to know, who is the end discussion about codes, who's the end discussion about turnaround time, who's the end construction discussion about inspection issues and stuff like that,
Okay. Yeah, we can build this out for sure. Roger is the building official, formally the chief building official. So he will have ultimate decision-making authority as it relates to alternative means and methods and other determinations with respect to code compliance. His decisions are appealable to the Construction Board of Appeals. But the deputy building official is really the day-to-day supervisor of operations for the whole division. And so, Greg, and then the person that we hire ultimately to fill that role as a city employee are available to you he's available to you for all of the above. So Greg is really going to be the one to support the success of Vanessa, Trevor, and John, and he can be engaged really about any topic, but specifically in terms of, the permits, fee estimates, status, and a range of issues around your permit application. Vanessa will continue to be your go-to there. Trevor is your go-to with respect to your building inspections and how those are going, remote inspections, any issues that you're having in the field will be follow-up with Trevor specifically. And then on code enforcement issues, if there's any enforcement and follow-up, John Mezzapezza will help you resolve those issues. And so I think part of the confusion previously about who the go-to was is that our org structure had supervisors straddling the fence between inspections and plan check and other components of the work, but we have sort of streamlined the org structure here to where each of the supervisors are fully responsible for the functions of the teams below them. And so hopefully, John, it's more intuitive now in terms of based on your issue, who you speak to, but we can also build this out as you've requested.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Let's see. So I want to also highlight some administrative improvements that are in process, and this is still in terms of review of what's going on in the building and safety division. We have a number of process improvements in progress right now. So what we're doing is, and this isn't a complete list, but these are some of the things that I think would be important to you. We're updating our building permit application itself. We're also creating application checklists, which is something that we used to have but have gone away from, and now we want to get back to having application checklists. We're looking to develop standard construction details for building permits, and that can certainly help in terms of response to comments on a plan check. Sometimes it's just about bolting that construction detail into a plan, that's the standard, so that you can respond to a comment quickly and get a permit issued. One important thing I want to highlight is that, in working with Trevor and based on some of his past experience, we are going to be eliminating building inspection caps that we currently work with. And so when you call for inspections in the future, we will always be able to take next day inspections. If we're not able to accommodate that, there may be times when the inspector calls and asks to be able to roll that inspection over to the next day. But for the most part, we expect to be able to offer next day inspections based on the change in method that we're going to use to schedule those inspections. And I think over the past, basically during COVID, we had periods of time where we were 3 days out, 4 days out from when you would call to an inspection to when that inspection would actually be able to be provided. And we're working to eliminate that situation. We're also looking to improve internal policies and procedures, and to do this in a formal way that's transparent and that all staff have access to, are trained on, and so that there's a strong baseline of understanding of what that is. And then that information is shared with the development community so that there's accountability on both ways. And a couple of those things would include building inspection checklists. And so, when a building inspection, a specific inspection is called for, there's a checklist there. So you're going to know exactly what that inspector is coming out to inspect ahead of time. And that will be the focus of the inspector when they're on the site, is inspecting those items that you had called for inspection on. And then the other one I wanted to highlight were, our policies and practices around field revisions. I know it's been an issue where it feels like it is, you're sort of at the whim of the inspector as to whether or not a field revision will be acceptable and can be approved in the field, or whether it has to be submitted for plan check and go through sometimes what could be a lengthy process. And so in 2017, I know that Mark Sadowski had sent a memo to the community that covered some of those items, but really it was pretty thin on specifics in terms of when a field revision would be appropriate and when coming back into the office was required. And so we're going to do our best to define that to a much greater degree. Inspectors do have their field revision stamps. Plans are approved subject to field verification. So there are cases where a plan doesn't match reality, and discussions have to occur at that point to make sure that ultimately what is being constructed is code compliant. But our goal is to not slow down development projects in process to the greatest extent possible. Our goal is to make sure that projects are built consistent with the building code, and that we're paying attention to health and safety to the greatest extent possible, but working with the developer to accomplish that when there are changes. All right, John.
Sorry that I keep butting in.
It's okay.
So as far as the inspection process goes, are you guys going to update your inspection cards as well? Specifically, I've been told during inspections that things like pre-final don't exist anymore, and not to bother calling for it, and other inspections breaking them up, even though there's specific checkboxes that, for example, to test the drain, waste, and vent in a house before full MEP is ready, that inspectors don't want to come out and do that. So are you guys going to update the card, or are you going to give different direction to the inspectors going forward?
That's a great point, and I would say that we're going to update the card, right? Like what we're working on through this process, and we have a consultant resource actually embedded with us in the department to accomplish these things. So this isn't just extra work that we're trying to do as staff as we go. We're not trying to, build the plane while we fly it as much. We have a dedicated resource. We're investing in accomplishing these process improvements. And so I think updating the card along with the inspection checklist makes a lot of sense, John.
Cool, thank you.
Just making notes too. All right. And then finally, for building and safety, although this really affects all of your work with the Community Development Department in the city, is an EnerGov update. And so EnerGov is updating. There's a new version that's available. If you do work with the county, I believe that they have already launched. And we are working towards that. In the next few days, we'll actually have the upgraded EnerGov in our development environment, and our staff will be training, and we'll be getting ready to roll it out. This should be available to the public in spring 2022. So the next developer roundtable will probably focus specifically on the EnerGov update, because we want to share some information with you so that you're able to use it right from the beginning. But some of the things that are important to know about what's coming with EnerGov, which is our permitting software, is that there's going to be an updated user interface. So there'll be some new learning of how to navigate. There's an enhanced customer portal with access to your permit status. So you'll be able to, as a user of the system, you'll be able to log in, review all of your permits in process, and not just see status under review, but you'll actually be able to see who that plan is with, what the deadline is for their response. And then of course you have contact information to be able to check in. So if anybody is, if your plan check response is late, you will be able to check in with the staff person that hasn't provided comments back, to be able to get a more refined time frame on that. We're also going to be able to accommodate electronic plan checks. So all of our EnerGov implementations are really working towards becoming a paperless organization. And one of the important aspects of that, of course, is electronic plan check. And so we'll be facilitating that. Inspection scheduling will go online, so you won't have to call in for an inspection. You'll be able to just go into your portal as a user of the system to schedule your inspection. And then there's also going to be an online application procedure and a decision engine that will guide you to the exact, to the correct application for the process that you want to apply for. All right, John, I guess your hand's not up, but you were highlighted. Any questions about anything EnerGov related? All right. Okay, so now we'll move into planning and affordable housing part of the agenda. SB 9 has been the hot topic. This is the only slide that I have on SB 9 today, but if you want to hear me and Teresa McClish speak more about SB 9, I would check out the video from last night's Planning Commission meeting. If you haven't looked at our new agenda system on the website, slowcity.org, it's really convenient, and the video is all on demand. So you can call up last night's presentation on demand and hear the full presentation. But basically some of the highlights about SB 9 include that it's effective January 1st, 2022. This is a new state law approved by the legislature, signed into law by the governor, allowing 2 primary residences on a R1 zone piece of property. And this is statewide. And in the city of San Luis Obispo, of course. It also allows for urban lot splits. So you have the ability either to develop an individual property with an additional primary residence, or to accomplish an urban lot split, create 2 lots out of one. However, there are sort of limited opportunities to implement those lot splits and to add units. There are limited opportunities to combine SB 9 rules with ADUs and junior ADUs. And there are provisions that really, one of my big takeaways in terms of our analysis of SB 9 so far is that it is a owner occupied property benefit. So on SB 9, there are a lot of limitations. If a tenant has occupied the property in the last 3 years, then your ability to modify any of the buildings on the existing piece of property are very limited. And so primarily what we expect to see are projects that go forward on owner occupied properties, primarily larger lots that can accommodate more housing. However, we do expect, and this is the big takeaway, that ADUs will continue to be a more attractive and affordable way to add units to a particular piece of property than SB 9 development. And this table on this slide really highlights what the reasons are behind that assessment. Also want to highlight that the City Council has granted final approval to our objective design standards. And objective design standards are, it's a set of criteria in the city zoning regulations for any project that requires the city to approve it on a ministerial basis. So there are a lot more projects that are falling under that category, but a ministerial approval, what that means is that we're not exercising any discretion. You're not going to public hearings with the Architectural Review Commission or the Planning Commission, or even a director's action application. When we talk about non-discretionary and by right processing, what we mean is that you get to just go ahead and submit a building permit application for your project. And then where the objective design standards come in is that we apply those standards to the project to ensure that that plan complies with what the regulations provide for. And, the objective design standards, they cover quite a bit. I just, want to highlight that objective design standards, they look at, let's see, I've just got some information in front of me, building materials, building details, roof designs. They address rooftop decks. I mean, specifically, they prohibit rooftop decks if you're doing by right processing. They address massing and articulation of new units, privacy and overlook, landscaping. So even though we're not doing a discretionary review like an entitlement application, we're still implementing city design criteria through that process. Important to note on SB 9 units, impact fees are required, so you're looking at $40,000 to $50,000 of additional costs for an SB 9 unit in comparison to an ADU. And then ADUs will continue to be easier to permit in terms of what the timeframes are. So when you submit an application for an accessory dwelling unit, the legislation actually requires the city, once the application's been deemed complete, to issue that permit within 60 days. And so we're able to accomplish that now. That then continues to be a more predictable, I think, and useful provision of our code for getting additional units on single family lots. So any questions about SB 9? The image in the presentation is actually a duplex. And so it kind of goes to show from a missing middle standpoint, duplex, triplex, the different houses, at least one example of a different housing type that would now be allowed in R1 single family zones. Right. The next topic I wanted to cover is our inclusionary housing ordinance updates. This has been in process, but we're getting ready to have a public process around inclusionary housing and want to make sure everybody's aware of where we've been and where we're going. And so first off, and linked here is that we have completed an affordable housing nexus study. So I think many of you know that our current requirements for affordable housing, inclusionary housing units, it's 3% low income or 5% moderate income for development within the 1994 city limits, for development outside the 1994 city limits. So that's our expansion areas like the Orcutt area and the like San Luis Ranch, Avila Ranch. The criteria was 10% moderate income and 5% low income. So there's a 15% requirement. What we learned through our Nexus study is that the maximums that we should be requiring are 15%. And so that's something that we presented to the City Council last year and are using as the basis, but I want to highlight that those are maximums. And what we're doing now, what is in process is some financial analysis that will refine those maximums based on financial feasibility. So we did this in 2018 when we updated our impact fee program. We don't just look in this case at the cost of affordable housing to a development. We look in total at how the cost associated with affordable housing affects development feasibility. And that's going to help us come up with a recommendation that we can move forward with and discuss with the community. So that's in progress, but we'll have more information about that soon. And another important part of our inclusionary housing ordinance update is the incorporation of an administration component for our affordable housing units into the ordinance going forward. So what the city has done is issued an RFP and selected a below market administrator. That company is House Keys. They also serve other jurisdictions within the state and have a lot of experience at dealing with inclusionary housing units. So what their role is to basically manage the city's considerable affordable housing portfolio. So in total, the city has over 1,000 units, well over 1,000 units of affordable housing, whether those are inclusionary housing units or whether they are units that are built by our nonprofit partners. Affordable housing in the city is obviously something that's very important, but as the portfolio grows, our ability as staff to manage that portfolio and oversee compliance in particular is challenged. And so basically we have experienced a fork in the road, so to speak, in terms of how the city is going to deal with administration of affordable housing. And that fork would either lead us to having a below market administrator, which we have now, or having our own housing department. We're not going down the path of having a housing department, rather an administrator that will manage our portfolio and then be our agent in the related transactions. And so we are going to have very specific tailored presentations and meeting opportunities on this topic with House Keys and with our and on these other topics as it relates to inclusionary housing. Those are going to start in January. So there'll be, I think January 13th is the first one, and we'll get the invitations out here shortly following this meeting. But we're going to do at least 3 of those prior to a March study session that we have with the City Council. And you can see some of our preliminary recommendations as outgrowth of the work that we've done so far, and those continue to be under development. So Emily.
Hi there, yes. And maybe there's not an answer yet on it, but as far as the administration with house keys, is there an expectation of, does that come with additional administrative cost to the developers for their services? Or is that a service the city has provided just simply through a contractor style arrangements?
So essentially, that's a service that the city provides right now. The general fund essentially subsidizes how developers comply with the requirements of the inclusionary housing ordinance. The advice that's been given to us is that that's not a sustainable model long term. And we don't intend to sort of grow city staff, again, to have the housing component. So what the city staff supports is the contract with House Keys that provides for the administration of the portfolio. So that's an ongoing general fund expenditure. And there are going to be costs to the developer that relate to any transactions that occur to comply with inclusionary housing requirements. And that's all part of the process as we move forward in terms of discussing what those costs are. Those costs exist right now. It's a question of who is paying those costs and who benefits from the value generated by that work. And so those are, I know, important topics. I can see Ermina's engaged, Donna's engaged. These are, I spoke to the Realtors Association earlier today, and I gave them a heads up that we'll be coming back to talk about inclusionary housing ordinance. I know that there are concerns about the way that House Keys will engage as our agent, to the extent that that reduces the ability that realtors currently have to transact units within the city's program. And there will be opportunities for realtors and for lenders to be trained and fully integrated into the program. But what the administration by an administrator provides to the city are some extremely important. One, it's an efficient way for the city to provide that service rather than providing it via city staff. Two, these are experts that ensure compliance with HCD guidelines for how inclusionary and affordable housing is managed. And so we've been operating in an environment for some time where the State Department of Housing and Community Development has not exercised a strong regulatory arm as it relates to how jurisdictions manage inclusionary and affordable housing. We understand that that is changing. Housing HCD at the state level is becoming much more proactive as it relates to enforcement. And we need to be on a footing where we can immediately show how we have complied with state law as it relates to transactions of affordable housing units. And so an important part of that will be training for lenders and for realtors that operate within this space and engage with buyers and sellers in the affordable housing program. But it's also going to be much more frequent oversight and auditing of the transactions that occur. So really, every transaction that occurs, if it's going to be done by our administrator. If it's not done by our administrator, it's audited by our administrator, because it's our responsibility to maintain all of those records and be able to be responsive to the State Department of Housing and Community Development should they come forward with an enforcement or with an audit. We are also going to be auditing our program to ensure compliance on a much more frequent level with House Keys on board. Any other specific questions on that point? All right. Well, I
see.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
I see Donna Lewis's hand up.
Is your hand up? Okay, Donna.
Yeah. So Michael, it would be, I think, really great. There's so much to be covered in that, in the way that in the interpretations of the way in which house keys might kind of more globally change the process for everybody involved, not just the real estate community, but developers who build new housing units and things that are affordable. It would be really awesome to be able to have a meeting separate from house keys and really just more an informational meeting from the city's angle with those stakeholders, so that we can ask lots of good questions and understand things outside of a house keys representative being in that meeting, and then move into that kind of a scenario. But I don't think anybody's had an opportunity as a group to really parse out some of the things that I've had an opportunity to look at in terms of how the ways in which this is going to change the way we're doing things now.
Yeah, that sounds good, and really appreciate your engagement and the input that you've had already. I mean, we are very closely considering all of the input that you've provided, and making sure that we're responding to that. We haven't provided point by point responses to the inputs that you have, but please don't take. I mean, that's because this is an ongoing process. It's not because we're not taking all of that into careful consideration. So I think what we'd like to do first is make sure that you do have the opportunity to engage with house keys and hear directly from them, because they're the experts, and we've brought them on because of their expertise and because of the scope of services that they provide. So they need to be part of those conversations. They're our agent in these matters, and they're gonna speak for the city in these matters in the way that that we need them to. That doesn't mean they have to be part of every meeting. We'll certainly be happy to hear from you directly about your concerns that you might have or issues that you might have with the role that they're playing, and we could do that separately. But we won't be able to answer all of your questions with the level of expertise needed without their support.
I appreciate what you're saying. I respectfully disagree. It was just about having everybody understand kind of where the city's heads at in terms of what the city's expectation is for the things that house keys will be doing, and giving people that information in a really clear way before we launch into a meeting with house keys. That's all. So I think there's a lot of people out there that probably appreciate that information before that. But anyway.
Okay. That's great. Any other follow-up or input on that point? All right. Okay, next up, I wanted to talk about new development review thresholds. I think that goes back to 2018 when the comprehensive zoning regulations update was approved by the city council, that we really changed the pathways to entitlements for various actions that the city takes. And I think what I want to highlight today is that we've made further refinements to that. And so we have these three different tiers: minor, moderate, and major. At this point in time, what will continue is that the Architectural Review Commission and Cultural Heritage Committee continue to be advisory in the development review process. They don't make any final decisions. That was a big shift that occurred in 2018. And so now when a project goes to the Architectural Review Commission, their action is advisory to the director or advisory to the Planning Commission, depending on what tier the project exists in. But we've just modified the tiers further. So for instance, now basically new single unit or multi-unit residential mixed-use developments of 10 units or less are done as minor. So that's no public hearing, and that's a director's action. Moderate is, with 11 units to 49 units, or for new non-residential buildings of between 2,500 square feet up to 10,000 square feet. that those will go to the Architectural Review Commission or the Cultural Heritage or the Cultural Heritage Committee, depending on the site. But again, those will be recommendations to the director. So it'll be a staff level decision on new residential projects up to 49 units. And then for 50 or more, or for new buildings over 10,000 square feet, that's the major now. And those projects will go to the Planning Commission for final approval with the recommendation of either or both the Architectural Review Commission and the Cultural Heritage Committee. And, you know, we had a chance to look high level at some of the numbers out there. It's very encouraging. We'll produce a report on this topic, but basically, since the new standards went into effect, we've been able to process about 200 projects that would have had a different type of decision made that are now be able to be done at the staff level. And where about only 20 projects went to the Planning Commission for final approval. And so, you know, this is something where as a process improvement, we've really pushed down decision-making authority. We are super busy in our office in terms of those administrative director action permits. There are quick turnaround times. There are a lot of permits in that category. And so there's a lot of hustling that is occurring right now on those director action permits. We have more, you know, assistant planners than we've had in the past to help with that work. And we're seeing, you know, fewer projects go to the Planning Commission, certainly, but also fewer projects going to Architectural Review. And that, you know, reduces permit timeframes. It also provides more certainty to you as the applicant in terms of, you know, what the outcomes are going to be. And so, you know, just wanted to highlight that because those are new thresholds that will go into effect here in 2022. And don't see any questions on that. Moving next, I've got some COVID updates that I wanted to highlight. One, you know, parking regulations and sign regulations. We continue to be in a pandemic emergency. So we're continuing to identify violations of sign and parking regulations, but we're pretty much just advising at that point that there's not going to be any enforcement, but there would be if the pandemic emergency subsides. And so that'll be something that, you know, we've seen a lot of helpful signage during the pandemic that just helps people understand what businesses are open and what services are being provided. And we realize that that's a need during these times. Also, people have really been able to activate their parking lots in ways that have been very helpful. And so we will continue to enable that through a temporary or intermittent use permit process. We've been doing these Tip Fast program, which are TIs that we take the application in on a Thursday. We give you comments back the following Tuesday, and then the permit gets issued the next Thursday. So 1 week turnarounds on TIs, and we processed 33 of those. And we also have a rebate program where all TIs are getting rebates right now as part of our you know, economic recovery program. And I believe we have up to $250,000 of funding for this program. We've used $86,745,000 so far, and these are basically refunding the plan check and inspection fees associated with the building permit up to $5,000 per project. And so, you know, the maximum refund is $5,000 per project. So you can see we've already done $86,000 worth of refunds. There's a lot of projects that we're being able to support through economic recovery goals. Our virtual inspections are ongoing. Those are primarily handled by Trevor Nelson, but it gives us the ability to, you know, if there's a missed inspection or if something happens where, you know, we can kind of quickly quickly recover and get on the phone and do a FaceTime or a Google Duo or whatever the video app might be to do a virtual inspection. So that's a service we offer. And then self-certifications, we're essentially ready to launch self-certifications. We've worked, John Tricamo, thank you. We've worked with you, and we've had a couple of other developers that have done proof of concept for us on self-certifications. And so we're ready to launch that in the new year. That's for licensed contractors to be able to perform certain inspections, video or photo documents the work that's done. We have an online form that you submit once you've been authorized to do that inspection, and then we evaluate the work in the office. Now that's initially this was developed as a time saver. As it turns out, it's not a time saver for inspectors or for our staff, but we do believe it offers a good service to licensed contractors that are performing, routine residential work and want to move on to the next portion of the project. So being able to document and submit that form to us means they don't have to wait for an inspection in some cases. And so we're going to continue to offer that, even though it's not quite serving the initial purpose that we had identified. But I think it's a service that people will appreciate, and so we'll continue to do it. And then that, is about almost an hour of just, kind of me working through that presentation. But for the rest of the time, I want to move more into roundtable discussion. And, specifically, we want to get, feedback and input on a couple of points. One that I wanted to reach out and hear back from you on is our hours of operation. Our counter since coming back in person with the pandemic, we have limited open hours of operation. So the counter at 919 Palm is open on Monday and Wednesday from 1 to 4, and on Tuesday to Thursdays it's open from 9 to 12. And so how's that working for you? That's my question to you. Emily.
Yeah, so the counter hours are limited. I guess it's a question of, is there a target or horizon of when they would be more fully open? I think especially challenging is not having Friday hours of any kind. That's a fully missed day if you're not there. So I guess is there a target of extending those hours? Because I think I'm probably not the only one that would prefer some more flexibility.
Right. So right now there is no target to change this. This is our plan going forward. And but the purpose of having the discussion is to, hear the input. If it's impacting your ability to do work, that's what we need to know. One of the ways that we've tried to mitigate the limited hours is by offering appointments basically at any time. And so like for Fridays, you can do work on Fridays, but it just requires an appointment in advance. And, the work based on the work schedules for our staff, there are a lot of staff that work 9-hour days and take every other Friday off. And those Fridays are staggered. So Fridays are a challenging time maybe to reach the person that you need to meet with, but for other reasons, but do want to make sure you're aware that appointments are available if you're running into a challenge with the closure. Darren.
Thank you. Just hit on the point I was going to ask or mention about is the appointment availability for off-hour meetings as well. So I think as long as that's continuing, I think that could fill in the gaps where some open counter hours are not available depending on your schedule. So it's good to hear the update of where you are now with your open office hours, and this is the plan going forward. So we'll just make sure we adjust our schedules accordingly to to meet those hours or coordinate office appointments where they don't meet our hours. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Right, anybody else on that topic? All right, well, the next item we wanted to just highlight is our Clean Energy Choice Program, which has been in effect for over a year now. We're currently developing a memo that we're going to share with the City Council just to basically summarize our experience over the past year plus of working with Clean Energy Choice. I know many of you know that Clean Energy Choice is about expressing the city's preference that all new buildings be all electric, and that if anybody wants to build mixed fuel buildings, that those come with increased requirements for energy efficiency. And so for those of you that have built new in the city over the past year, you've experienced that process. And what we're doing right now is evaluating what the last year has accomplished in order to make the best recommendations possible to the City Council going forward. So the context of this is that 2022 is a code cycle year. So we're going to be updating a new we're going to have a new building code in 2022 to evaluate, and we're going to do our local amendments in September of 2022 for the new building code that'll go into effect January 1st, 2023. And so we're going to be starting that discussion with a February 1st study session with the City Council. To report out to them on status and have a community conversation, but also get some direction for how we go forward, with Clean Energy Choice. How do we accomplish what our climate action and our greenhouse gas reduction goals are? The best way to do that will be making recommendations on that. And so Chris Reed is here to join us today, and what he would like to do initially is just share with you that there are lots of incentives out there right now for building all electric, or in particular for doing that energy switch from a mixed fuel building to an all electric building. So Chris, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll see what kind of questions there might be and have a little discussion on this topic.
Yeah, thanks, Michael, and good morning to everyone. So yeah, we continue to see building and vehicle electrification as top priority products conversations nationally across the state and in our region. It's interesting to think, the California Energy Commission just approved the 2022 Energy Code. It does heavily prioritize electric new buildings. The CEC, it was thought they might actually go towards a route that removes natural gas as a compliance option. Didn't quite go there, but maybe moving in that direction. We also see at the state level, the Air Resources Board is updating their 2022 statewide scoping plan, and we'll expect to see some statewide action on this. The good news is that we are seeing funding sources start to open up. So I'm just going to start by talking about some resources if you want to add electric vehicle charging, or if you want to do some retrofits on your on some of the either properties you manage, or maybe projects that some of your clients might be looking into. For electric vehicle infrastructure, our community choice energy provider, Central Coast Community Energy, has up to $3,000 per EV charger, plus an additional $5,000 for infrastructure. That's $8,000. That can cover up to 100% of total project costs, and that's per charger. So that is, a really nice way to essentially, with no capital cost, provide some of those assets or benefits to your development, or to any tenants you might have in multifamily developments. We expect the APCD electric vehicle charging infrastructure funds to essentially double next year. And that's on top of the Cal EVIP 2022 funding round. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of resources to install electric vehicle infrastructure in the next couple months and into 2022. For building retrofits, we're also seeing just a ton of investment start to flow down from the state. We'll expect even additional federal funding in the next 12 to 18 months. But right now, our Central Coast Regional Energy Network, I think some of you might be aware of them, 3C REN, they're implementing statewide California Public Utilities Commission program for multifamily projects with up to $3,000 in incentives per unit for fuel switching. So if you have any multifamily projects and you have mechanical equipment or you have appliances that are end of life, if you transition those from natural gas to high efficiency heat pump appliances, you can get up to $3,000 per unit. I think can't remember what the max is across a project, but lots of resources there. And that's stackable with the recently opened tech program, which also provides upwards of several $1,000s per unit. So there's lots of capital flowing in that if you have, again, some planned maintenance needs in some of your buildings, particularly in the multifamily space, there are resources to add into the capital stack to help you get those projects done. We're also doing retrofit pilots right now. So we know these retrofits are some of the hardest ways to do building electrification. Every building's different, obviously, and there's just lots of complexity abound. But we do have in our work program working on some pilots. We have resources to do that. We're just awarded a couple $100,000 from the state to do some of these pilots. Right now, we're primarily working with affordable housing providers. But if any of you have a project that you have some fuel switching interests, and it can be central heating and cooling equipment, water heating, or in unit or in unit heating, space conditioning and water heating, please let us know. We can likely connect you with technical assistance and access to some of these resources. On new buildings, Central Coast Community Energy is, they've updated their program for the new building all electric incentives. It's now $2,500 per unit, but that unit does need to be affordable as designed by their program. But if you have an affordable housing unit in your project coming up in the next year, you can go ahead and submit for that now. And again, $2,500 per unit up to $150,000 per development. Michael already covered sort of where we're headed in 2022 on the update, but we'll definitely look forward to if that February 1st study session and the conversation that will create. Also commit right now, I'll put together an email with links to all of these resources. So as you consider making some of these investments or just want to learn more, you'll have access to those. So that'll be the end of my report, and happy to answer any questions or if there's any discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. If anybody wants to talk about clean energy choice and your experience with building all electric, we'd be happy to hear from you. All right, not seeing any hands. All right, well, there will be a lot of opportunities to engage on this topic. Look out for that follow-up email from Chris with links and more information about not just clean energy choice, but the incentives and other things that are available to you via our partnership with and membership with CCE. And then moving on then to the last discussion item, really what I wanted to do is check in on this format and see what you think. If this is actually the most attendance that we've had at a developer roundtable meeting, and that could be because of the length of time that it's been since we've had one, but it also could be the format. Maybe this is convenient for you. Again, I wish we could be in person in order to provide you with some lunch and that kind of thing, but if that would mean that only half of you would participate, then maybe this actually works. So I'm interested in your feedback on this. I'm also interested in future agenda items that you'd like to see us cover. So start with Carol. Glad you can make it.
Thank you. I did make it.
And I recorded, this meeting is recorded too, Carol. So I was going to send you the recording right afterwards, but a number of people did.
Yeah, thanks for that. Well, but the PowerPoint, because there was a lot of information on that would be great. But I just think that I could speak for everyone that's on the call, that we do appreciate this kind of engagement and interaction. There's never enough of it, I don't think. So thank you all and staff for doing that and for the changes that you've been working on that we didn't know about. I think the only other thing is, sometimes these are few and far between, if you will. So Michael, how would be the best way if we wanted to lodge other questions concerns, etc. What does that look like on a more individual and at the moment basis?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to do that is to email me directly. You know, I'm very accessible to all you. I think you know that, via phone and email. But I think that's probably the best thing to do. You know, Matt Quaglino, for example, engaged ahead of this meeting and provided some input that allowed me to focus on a couple of those issues during the presentation. Same with Donna. And so I think that if you have items that come up for you, please share those with me. Maybe Carol, also what something that I spoke to earlier is that these meetings are going to be quarterly and regular. So we're going to have a schedule that we produce. So it will be more of a routine aspect of the engagement that we do in community development. And so hopefully it'll become a lot more fluid in terms of how people engage and propose agenda items for discussion.
Yeah, thanks for that, Michael. I think that as your customers, you know, when you institute something new, I think for you and for all of us, having that feedback almost immediately to say, wow, this part's great, or these parts aren't, so that you're not doing it in a vacuum, and you know, we're on the receiving end of that, if you will. But I do appreciate you trying to streamline, and I think everyone recognizes and certainly acknowledges the difficulties that the pandemic has wrought that are still not over, and we're going to feel the effects for quite a while. But all we can do is exactly what we're doing, is try and communicate with each other, because we're all in this together. This is our community. I'll end with that.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's an important comment to make. So thank you, Carol. Greg, nice to see you.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I would point out that I think that while I miss seeing everybody that has their name on the screen here, and I appreciated the gathering that we did in the small hearing room, this is actually really an efficient way to do this kind of a meeting. We can get a lot of information out quickly, and a lot of us are, you know, we've all done this. We're all on mute and we're doing something else on the sideline while we're listening to you. So I think it's helpful, and I appreciate that. One of the things that I would like to bring up as a future discussion item, similar to your work with John Tricamo and the self-certification, is looking at the ability for building staff and especially inspection staff to be able to accept observations or reviews by licensed professionals that are in the field. Oftentimes, I can go out and I do my own kind of structural observation check, and then the inspector comes out and they do theirs also. And I think we could actually save some time. Generally, the licensed professional is more intimately familiar with the project than the inspector who comes out and spends 10 minutes. And so I'd like to have that as a discussion item of how the city can use their professional affiliates to take some of the workload off and actually provide a better service to our client too. Other jurisdictions are doing this, even Cal Poly is doing this. So just something to discuss in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Greg. And I guess I'll take the opportunity to reintroduce Trevor. Trevor Nelson is our supervising building inspector. He's taken on an acting role, and we appreciate him stepping up to do that. He wasn't able to join us earlier, but he's here now. So I don't know, any thoughts on that, Trevor? We'll support that in a future discussion, but do you have anything immediately on that comment?
Yeah, it could definitely be a great discussion to have in the future.
Great. Okay, thanks, Greg. And Andy.
Great, thanks so much. I'm, kind of switching hats back and forth here. So this is on the architect side of things. And I've heard that like the AIA and maybe other professional organizations that want to weigh in on specific policies and programs that the kind of the when the city agenda report or a planning commission agenda report comes out only a week ahead of time, they don't get kind of a big enough window. So it's not necessarily that there needs to be public, a separate public meeting, but I'm wondering, as I think about like the Clean Energy Choice Program, if it's coming to council as a study session in February, if we can get that type of material out to the development community, maybe a couple weeks ahead of time, so that they can review it as organizations. So they're ready to make comments on those kinds of policy items.
Yeah, absolutely. The process of identifying the stakeholders and any process improvement or change that we're doing, is important. And because we don't want to be hearing, feedback or testimony for the first time when it's in front of, the city council for a decision. We like to, as staff, make sure that we know what all the issues are and what the questions are going to be. And we fully vet those out and have responses before we put anything in front of the city council, so we can support, your best decision making. So I think on clean energy choice, I don't recall last time around if we presented to AIA, but I think we did. And so we can certainly do that this time. And then Chris is giving a thumbs up too, so that's good. Any other items for discussion or future agenda items that folks would like to hit on today? Pierre. You're on mute.
Yeah, I got you.
There you go.
I'd like to, what Andy brought up, I think applies to other groups besides the IA. I think the Chamber of Commerce should be in that group, as well as the Downtown Association or Downtown Slow, because for certain things like TIs, for instance, in the downtown, any policy changes require, in those organizations, require a subcommittee meeting and then a board meeting to actually to form a position to present to the council. So there's a lot of lead time in any organization that's that big to be able to respond responsibly. So I support that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And both the Downtown Association and Chamber, we don't, on big policy items, if we go forward to the city council without a recommendation for the Chamber, that's not a recipe for success. So we definitely appreciate their engagement and work with them as closely as possible.
The others as well. There may be some nonprofits that periphery.
Yep. Well, thanks, Pierre. Anybody else? Okay, well, not seeing anybody else raise their hand, that I can give you back 15 minutes of your lunch hour. Really appreciate your engagement and participation on the call. Look forward to these being more regular in the future, and we'll be following up with a copy of the presentation, a link to the recording, and other information that we discussed here in summary form. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.